few moments, please. I was going to tell you, Bridget, the camera's not out of focus. This is what it gets. It doesn't improve, unfortunately. Okay, I've got 2 points for you to think about. All right, first of all, I'm talking to the younger people. How many of you all went out for Halloween? Raise your hand high. Matt went out for Halloween. Good. Yes. All right. Okay. Yes, you went up for Halloween? Good. How many of you... What are you doing, Sharon? Stop picking on him. How many of you went to a party or instead of going out? One or the other. I'm going to talk to the older teens. Anyone? Oh, God, I used to go to parties. Oh, okay. Fair enough. The point I'm making is the only secular holiday we have which is based on a religious feast, All Hallows Eve. You say All Hallows Eve fast enough for centuries and it becomes Halloween, the night of the dead. A night we reflect on some very important, serious stuff. The second thing I want you to think about for a second is just to look around this church, not at the people here, but fortunately at some of the plaques. And I want you to look at St. John's. Your St. John's, their St. John's. You're not the whole story, and neither are they. There's a continuum. There's a community of people who believed in Jesus Christ, who worshipped on this spot, and it has gone on for year after year, decade after decade, and in this parish, century after century. Part of a story of people who made a commitment to live out their baptism, worshiping in this particular space. And you're part of that story. And someday, hopefully, maybe 100 years from now, there'll be still a community worshiping here. There won't be any plaque up to me. Most plaques are of clergy, by the way, which I think is a real waste of money. Okay, I think really you should have plaques of the people who actually did the work, okay, not the priests, because they're really part of your story. But even though there's probably not going to be a plaque on this wall for anyone in this building at the moment, you're still part of that story and a very important part of it. Third and final thing to think about. Isn't it beautiful with the colors? Despite the storms we had the other day. The trees are probably at 100%. It will be as beautiful as it's going to be. And probably starting with the next wind that comes around, those leaves will fall and they will die. And this part of Westchester County that everyone seems so in love with will look as barren and dead as anywhere else. It's a story of nature. Nature blossoms, nature flourishes, nature dies. And it's part of our story as well. Life is a journey, and it's limited. Life is a journey that leads to accountability, and for Christians, life is a journey, we're not afraid to say, leads to death and then leads to life. That's the important part. All Saints' Day is just a reminder of the journey. All of us are born, we go to school, we trek, we live, we love, we ache, we age, we return home. Probably no more powerful words in the entire Bible, the words that will be prayed over every single one in this room one day. To dust you are, and dust you shall return. That's our journey. But this is a day of remembrance for every person who has ever lived the gospel, who has tried to live a Christian life. Not necessarily great, important people who get into the media, not necessarily the important people who wear funny shirts and colors and whatnot, but all of us. I've said this to St. Paul's last night. I was not blowing smoke. I truly believe this in my heart of hearts. The greatest, most wonderful, most powerful Christian life I ever saw was not the priest who mentored me when I was a young clergyman, as much as I loved him as a big brother. The most powerful person I ever knew who lived the gospel was my grandmother. My grandmother was 5'0", if that. And she was a powerful presence in a room. And she raised her family in the Depression. And she lived with nothing. And she loved with intensity and passion. She kept me in line. And I loved her for it, and I will love her till the end of my life. A woman who truly took the gospel seriously, for whom Jesus was real. This is about remembrance of all the nameless unknowns who do God's work, for whom we are grateful. Whether we remember them or not, we know their good works do follow them. So on this All Saints' Day, in a couple of moments, instead of praying the creed as we normally do, we're going to renew our baptismal vows. We're going to remind ourselves that being Christian is very simply living those vows day after day to the best of one's ability. To be joined with Christ in baptism, we're united with him in his death and resurrection. We truly become daughters and sons of God. I live with Christ in baptism. I live into the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and life everlasting. And every child who is baptized in an Episcopal church today, because this is one of the traditional days of baptism, while beginning a journey, he also reminds us that being a Christian has very little to do with where you worship, the physical space, whether it's pretty, whether it's plain, whether it's ugly, whether it's a tent, or whether it's like the first people who worshiped in St. John's, basically outdoors in the elements. It doesn't make any difference where, and it doesn't make as much difference how. What does make a difference is what you do the moment you leave these walls, how you live the gospel, being signs of the kingdom. Church membership is not about a feeling. It's about how I live, how I touch the people who come into my life, the people I love, the people who love me, the people I don't love, although I try, and the people who don't love me, no matter how hard I try. The question of All Saints' Day is, in your life, was baptism an event or the beginning of a journey? How you answer that question determines whether 100 years from now, when they're praying on All Saints' Day, we're asking God, remember you, a saint from this parish. Amen.
Amen.